Buongiorno. Buongiorno, scusate, vi chiediamo cortesemente di prendere posto e di silenziare i vostri cellulari, grazie.
Good morning. We would kindly ask you to take your seats and mute your cell phones, please. Thank you.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Grazie.
Buongiorno.
Faccio solo una piccola introduzione e vi do subito
Prego.
la parola.
So I will start with a very brief introduction, and then I will leave the floor to Vice President of the Chamber of Deputies, Mr. Costa. And we are all here at in this beautiful hall, the Sala della Regina, for this event. The floor is yours, Vice President. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the heart of democracy. This is what I like to call it. It is a great pleasure to host you here, to have you here today. And I will take this moment to welcome my colleagues and people that I've also met in the past. And we also have things in common, the 15-minute city. It's true that we can't do everything we would love to do, we would like to do, but the seed has been planted. And as I was discussing with representatives of this event earlier, I was speaking with Professor Carlos Moreno, who had this intuition that I particularly appreciate, and he presented it in my home city, my hometown. And although I have somewhat of a cold, I don't know if you can tell, my accent is from Naples. And so he was there yesterday. And today I would like to take this opportunity to reflect upon a few points. The first is the fact that we are at the Chamber of Deputies. This is where we are hosting this event because we take to heart the issues of social coexistence, which is a fundamental element of society, but is also an element in combating climate change. And is something that is telling us at a global level that in the next few years, around 75% of the global population will be living in middle to large metropoles, large cities. Cities will become, therefore, a hub of social coexistence. And if we consider cities a hub of social coexistence, but also a hub for for climate change, climate mutation, they become a cities that survive on their own, and that is why we have to reflect on this here at the Chamber of Deputies, where we are neutral. We are not talking about left-wing or right-wing ideologies. It is a way of living. It is a way of dealing with the system that we are facing at a global level with a general political vision, not ideological. This is very different. We're not only considering this at a national level. With Professor Moreno, we were just saying that we have to look at this at an international level. And the Conference of Parties, the COP, have to take this into consideration. It must be a priority. The G7, the G20 have to consider this as a crucial element to be considered. BRICS must consider this. And so we have to work hand in hand on these issues, because these are problems that will come up in Tokyo, in Mexico City, in all cities of the world. That is why we must reflect on this here. And that is the main reason why I am delighted to have you here this morning. And I'm delighted to have you here for the reason that I just explained. Secondly, I was very interested in the level of institutions involved. So let's take a step back and focus on Italy, because that is where we currently are. If we consider that when we try to have a vision, if we are projecting a 15-minute city, we must consider that we have to engage with some sort of cooperation with territorial authorities, so cities, provinces, regions. It means that we must have a cross-cutting vision for this sort of management. It is no longer political when we think of it as something that is territorial. It's much more linked to the daily life of citizens and the inhabitants of cities. And so the role of society is much different at this point if we consider this. And I will end with this focus on 15-minute cities. And I wrote down 12 references that I would like to imagine as a new way of conceiving and of living together. Accessibility, health, reducing traffic, sustainable transportation, proximity, inclusivity, sustainability, reducing pollution, the social issue, social equity, urban regeneration, and integration of services. If we had to deal with them all individually, we would obviously have to host this event for many more days, which would be a pleasure, of course. But consider all of these 12 aspects, how complex they are and how much they influence the daily life of citizens. The intuition that they had in London was very visionary and was very interesting to me. London was defined from an administrative level a national park. It was defined a national park. The city, the metropolis of London, is considered a natural park, and it's surprising to many of us. But why is that? Well, it's because they are reducing the surface of the city that is covered in concrete, and they're replacing it with green areas. They're giving access to all citizens to green space, to green areas. This is part of this decree. It also means that they have green and social proximity. It's a different kind of national park that we consider in our daily lives, but it gives us an idea of what kind of courage we need to have to embark on this journey of change. That is what struck me in particular. And I will end with this provocation. We are, at the end of the year, we'll be voting the budget law, and we will have a forecast of a political vision from a budgetary point of view. So at this point, I would suggest, if you agree, and if we have parliamentarians who agree to do this, we could submit some amendments with an economic content based on our vision. They may be rejected. This is a possibility, of course, that we have to consider. But it's the beginning of a debate, an exchange at a parliamentary level. And from this parliamentary debate, we cannot go back. It means it's the beginning of something. It means that we have opened an exchange and a dialogue. And at this point, we can possibly consider family subscriptions for citizens who live in large cities so that they can use the subway, the metro, so that they would use their cars less. Or maybe we could replace city buses with electric buses. Or maybe we could help families commute by encouraging the use of bicycles. And we tried this when I was a minister. We partly succeeded, I have to say. But we planted this seed of vision, and we can do so many more things. So what I would encourage you to do today is to plant the seed of vision. We don't have to be presumptuous. We don't have to expect to change the world, but we must plant the seed of change so that we can try to change something, and we can do this together with the parliamentarians that are here today. Thank you very much.
Grazie dunque di queste belle parole, onorevole Sergio Costa.
Thank you very much for your visionary words, Vice President Costa. They really create a beautiful image of future cities. You were talking about cities in particular, of course, that is why we are here, and it involves us all at a national but also international level. And at this point, I would invite up to the stand Teresa Tabas, the Vice President of the International Union of Architects, who will talk about urban and territorial planification, following what Vice President Costa said in his introduction. The floor is yours.
Grazie. Buongiorno. Onorevole Sergio Costa, Vicepresidente.
Honorable Sergio Costa, Vice President of the Chamber of Deputies. Honorable President of the Massimo Crusi, President of the National Council of Architects, dear colleagues and honorable parliamentarians. It is a pleasure for me to be here as Vice President of the International Union of Architects, to be here today to present and to open up this debate at the Italian Parliament, to open up a discussion on the issue of territory. Thank you to my colleagues and my Lilian Caralea, my colleague and friend. I presented a brief presentation on the topic of today's event, in particular urbanism and territorial planning, something that we have been working on and continue working on over the past few years, 2023, 2024, and we are focusing on territory. And we are changing this vision of city. Cities should not be isolated. Thank you very much. I will begin my presentation.
This is the point. Just a moment. Okay. The scales of territory. This is the title of this speech. Just. The scales of territory, just a historical context. In recent decades, accelerated urbanization and population growth have intensified environmental problems. Events such as the financial crisis in 2008 and the increase in natural disasters have highlighted the need to rethink our territories, our planet. Introduction to the contemporary crisis. Current social, economic, and environmental crises demand new approach to territorial planning, which is essential to mitigate their impacts on our communities and environments. This section analyzes the historical context, the growing importance of planning, and the challenges we face. Current challenges, contemporary challenges include the water crisis, biodiversity loss, and climate change. These issues require innovative solutions in territorial planning that integrate technology and ecological awareness to address human impacts on the environment. This is the 17 goals of the United Nations. Most of them are linked with the territory. Most of them, the water, all the problems are around the territory. So this is the importance of the transition from the urban agenda to the territory. And this is scale. The scale is very important, the scale of the cities, the holistic vision, and the territorial net. The importance of establishing a new social pact between rural and urban areas lies in promoting a balanced relationship of interdependence and complementarity between both territories. We need, as architects, to promote a set of new policies and strategies aimed at improving the quality of life in cities, promoting sustainable and equitable development. Territorial solidarity. This is an important point that we, as architects, as professionals of urbanism and territorial planning, we need to think about this, because we need to shatter the narrative around the city and the territory, because if not, we are creating two parallel worlds, the rural and the urban. So this is very important. Territorial inequalities. Territorial inequalities widen due to unchecked population growth and uneven industrialization. The most affected regions face greater challenges in accessing basic services, creating a cycle of poverty that perpetuates these issues. The imbalance in the valuation of urban and rural territories lies in the unequal perception of them. This unequal valuation has led to a concentration of resources, investments, and opportunities in urban areas, leaving rural territories as disadvantaged. Recognize that both urban and rural territories play a fundamental role in sustainable development. Supply geographies. It is therefore necessary to adopt a broader and multidisciplinary approach, both from urbanism and from territorial planning, to ensure that the solutions adopted are not only effective, but also just and sustainable. This compels us to rethink our relationships with nature, that is, with the territory, instead of viewing nature as a resource to be exploited. We must adopt an approach of coexistence. The need, as I said before, to break the narrative constructed only from the city. Need for an alternative model and rural-urban binomial. An analytical reflection, a critical thinking process that as architects we must undertake from our professional discipline in the historical moment we are living, and why we must start to propose alternatives models in territorial planning to face the future under a social, economic, and environmental crisis. This is based on the idea that nature presents a dual component today, and understanding this basic concept is crucial to comprehend the complexity of the interactions between human beings and our environment. The climate emergency compels us without excuses or delays to redirect this framework. Territorial planning should promote and encourage beneficial relationships among different levels. And finally, Molte grazie alle Camere dei Deputati d'Italia e al Consiglio.
I would like to thank the Chamber of Deputies and the National Council of Architects. Thank you very much for your attention.
E dunque lo dicevamo prima, oggi siamo qui per questo.
As we were saying earlier, we are here today to present this new book, Italy of Proximity, the Future of Urban Planification and Territorial Planning. And the National Council of Architects, Planners, Landscape Architects, and Conservationists is just that. And at this point, I would invite the President of the Council to take the floor, Massimo Crusi.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning. These are institutional greetings, so I'll just use these few minutes to cover this part. Today's program will, of course, discuss what we're doing and the publication that we are launching here. So anyway, first, thank you to Vice President Costa, not simply for allowing us to be here today, but to bring into the Temple of Democracy an issue that is not a novelty, but that the National Council of Architects is strongly committed to. And, of course, greetings also to the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Lorenzo Fontana, and to Tullio Levi for his support together with Professor Provenzano. Certain events can only happen when everybody works together to achieve an aim. So a huge thank you to our council for coming up with this proposal and for the efforts that was behind the publication that started a year and a half ago. But nothing of this would have happened if the idea of setting up a scientific committee as authoritative as one led by Professor Moreno would not have been conceived. And my thank you also to the presidents of all the professional, of the architects and planners. And Mr. Costa was mentioning the territorial issue. We have a territorial network that exists in every Italian city and province. I will not discuss the other aspects because you'll now hear the keynote speeches. We'll have a round table. Of course, our warm thank yous to the senators and members of parliament who accepted to participate to the round table. Mr. Gasparri, unfortunately, Mr. Patuanelli could not make it for health reasons. We've tried anyway to guarantee the highest and best possible political representation, given this meeting happens in the parliament. And of course, Professor Moreno also will participate to the round table. Just a brief mention of the work of the National Council on this issue. The 8th Congress of Architects discussed the cities and territories of proximity, and this led to an effort of the Council and the Council's decision to focus on cities. Now, focusing on cities is very complex, but if you deconstruct complexity, you obtain simplicity. And from this perspective, I would like to emphasize the fact that cities are not unaffected by the environmental issue. Cities contribute to the environmental system. 20 years ago, we started discussing this. I was young back then, and we started discussing how the effects of environmental change. Nowadays, we don't simply discuss the effects, we can feel them. Emilia-Romagna, yesterday, today, and the day before yesterday is a perfect example, and so many other examples could happen from the US or so many other parts in the world. It's a world problem, as Vice President Costa said. No one can tackle this alone, but we must all individually face it and discuss it collectively. And the National Council of Architects tries to promote a new social culture for cities. Thank you.
Il Vicepresidente.
Vice President Costa said this is a beginning, and so let us start from the legislative framework in discussing our publication. And this will be covered, among the many issues, by Giuseppe Capucchin for his opening speech, head of the Department for Urban Reform and the Future of Cities. Good morning. Very, very warm thank you to Vice President Costa for the privilege of being here today and for his words that are so important for architects. This initiative is the occasion to launch the new publication of the Council of Architects, The Future of Urban and Territorial Planning, an essential one on the notion of cities and their future challenges, not only from an architectonic perspective, but also from a social, economic, ecologic, and cultural point of view. A book that was written under the scientific direction of Professor Moreno, a dear friend, and thank you so much for the privilege of working with you, Professor Moreno. Thanks to the contribution of authoritative international experts from various disciplines, we are trying to come up with proposals of urban transformation the health emergency that was caused by the pandemic reignited the debate on the future of cities and gave a strong impetus to the notion of urban proximity. The hard days of the pandemic exposed the current situation of territories and the need to rethink the indicators of urban well-being. Well-being in a city does not mean to be able to get to the city center driving your car, but actually having a chance at experiencing the city. In the framework of urban planning and the rethinking of urban planning, we must put in place organic programs in order to build a new unit for the various urban contexts, going beyond the zoning approach in order for all citizens, all inhabitants of a city to be able to access all the infrastructure of a city. Just in these days, and I thank Senator Ferro for being here today, after many hearings, the Environmental Committee of the Senate, the proposals are being submitted to modify the single text on urban regeneration. Planning decisions lead to a huge responsibility, particularly for lawmakers, because the decisions that will be taken on urban planning will have a huge impact on the generations to come. The crisis of the planet and the need to pursue a healthier lifestyle should be at the heart of the decisions that lawmakers take today, thinking of the future of the country. In Italy, in the near future, we hope that these objectives will be incorporated in the DNA of cities and territories. This is why we decided to set up an authoritative international scientific committee. All its members became real good friends, experts from various disciplines, all guided by Professor Moreno, all active in the various scientific areas that are relevant for urban development, with the aim of exploring in depth the transformative notions that should lead to a new project for Italian cities. The book is aimed at drawing the attention on the unsustainability of the current model for cities and territories, and to emphasize the common responsibility we have to plan and design in a way that leads to a responsible use of resources. The notion of proximity has become at the international level a crucial one when it comes to facing the ecological challenges and the challenge of a quality of life. The book comes up with examples on the possible programs that can be put in place in order to positively influence urban development and urban regeneration. The experts from the scientific committee will take the floor and touch upon those various aspects in the course of the morning. I will conclude this presentation by again emphasizing our how grateful we are to Professor Moreno for his incredible work of guidance. In Verona, we were discussing this. How was it possible that Professor Moreno accepted even to become a consultant for the Italian Council of Architects? Such an honor, dear Professor. In March 2023, at our headquarters in Piazza Navola, we laid down the foundations of our common, of this cooperation. The work done so far by the scientific committee is producing strategies, ideas, solutions for more human and sustainable territories, following the example, the most relevant international examples in this sphere. And Carlos Moreno came up with the idea of this book and managed to make it possible for all these incredible international experts to contribute to this publication. A huge effort was done in order to meet the deadline that was set in full August. We really feared we weren't going to make it. It was an actual miracle, and I am so grateful to all the authors of this book and to the entire scientific committee for their hard work in this first 18 months of work, a work that will continue with in-person meetings in Rome, Paris, Verona, and online meetings. And allow me to also thank Monica Schillaci, Laura Squillaci and Monica Maggioni for being here this morning. Thank you, Giuseppe Capochin. Before listening to Professor Moreno, I would invite all the experts, authors, all those who made this book possible to please come to the podium. You see your names written here on the podium: Peter Nica, Matteo Colleone, Chiara Martinuzzi, Pablo Fernandez, Marmisol Daguerre, Hélène Chartier, Benjamin Butner, Frédéric Salier. Please come to the podium.
Grazie. Vi ringrazio, grazie mille. Thank you. Frédéric Salier. Buongiorno. Good morning. Good to see you again. Ci siamo tutti. E allora siamo pronti.
Okay, so we are all here and we are ready to listen to Carlos Moreno, who theorized the 15-minute city and he implemented it. He chairs the scientific committee that produced this book. I will be quoting you here, Professor Moreno, to rethink the future of our cities. The 15-minute city is an answer to the urban development models of the past in the name of a sustainable future. Thank you.
Grazie mille, buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. I am delighted to be here in the Sala della Regina. Thank you to President Costa, and thank you, Vice President Costa. Thank you to my dear friend Massimo Crusi. Thank you to Giuseppe Capochin, of course, and thank you to everyone else on the scientific committee, my dear colleagues, and everyone present here this morning for this wonderful day dedicated to our publication, something that we have worked hard on, and we are delighted to be presenting today.
Thank you for this kind invitation. Thank you to the President, and thank you for all members of the Scientific Committee. Thank you to the different authors for being present in this important day, for launching together this new book, Italy in Proximity. I said that this is a happy day for a happy proximity. And of course, this book, this is the achievement of very important commitment of the different members of the scientific committee for the Consiglio Regionale, the Ordi, the Architetto, etc. And the first word is congratulazioni for tutti, for questo commitment. Congratulations. Today, I want to evoke why this book is a real contribution for maybe examining Italy under this paradigm to develop urban and territorial proximity for the next times, for the next years in this beautiful country. Of course, I'm very proud of this popularity of the 15-minute city concept, the città di 15 minuti. And permanence in the different conferences, I insist that the less important point for this concept is the number of minutes. There's 15 minuti. Okay, this is an image for evoking the importance of a new relationship between our urban and territorial space and our useful time for accessing to more services in order to improve our quality of life. We have the 15-minute city, very well known for the high density areas, and we wanted to promote as well this concept of the 30 minutes territory for the medium and low density zone. But in all cases, we need to pay tribute to different people that have contributed for explaining this concept around the world. The first person that I wanted to thank is the mayor of Paris, Miss Anne Hidalgo. I have started this research in 2010 when I have decided to switch from my first discipline, mathematics and computer science, towards the urban planning, territorial planning, for evoking the new ways in order to improve the quality of life in our cities and our territories. And Anne Hidalgo in 2019 has embraced this concept before the COVID-19. In November 2018, for preparing her new electoral campaign for her re-elections. And this picture is today very popular worldwide. Le Paris du quart d'heure, the Paris of 15 minutes. And we have this image translated in a lot of different languages. Recently, for the Olympics Games, Paris has shown that it is possible, in reality, to transform our cities with an ambitious and a strategic urban plan for offering a city for all, for offering this proximity, for spreading in our city more different services, for considering that the common good is really relevant for offering not only green areas, well, capability by capability, but for offering culture, education, opening a school during the weekend, to offer more public spaces for cultural activities, creating medical services, and etc. At the beginning, the mayor of Paris has started this global movement. And I'm very proud of learning that the president of the Île-de-France region, Paris is a small city, they 2.2 million inhabitants, for 120 square kilometers. And now, for the Île-de-France region, almost 9 million of inhabitants, the president of the Île-de-France region, in other political color, Valérie Pécresse, has embraced as well the same concept for customizing it in the framework of the Île-de-France region, the 20-minute Île-de-France region. This is the new strategic regional development program 2024-2040. This is in reality a good news, given that this concept is totally open for being customized in a lot of different contexts. This is not a doxa, this is not a dogma, this is not a checklist, this is not a concept with a copyright, with a patent, with a license. This is a common good in a totally open for showing that it is possible to offer with proximity a way for reconciling sustainability and quality of life. For a long time, we have opposed this necessary sustainability for fighting against climate change, for reducing our CO2 emissions, and for preserving our natural resources. And we have opposed with the economic development. We have opposed with this relevant point for creating added value. we have proposed with the 15-minute city, with the 30-minute territory, with the urban and territorial proximity, a strategic way for reconciling sustainability, the economical and social issues, and to improve the quality of life of inhabitants. Of course, I need to thank our strategic allies, the international organization of mayors involved for spreading this concept and to help to customize in the different continents around the world, regardless of the size and density of cities and territories that have embraced this concept. The first one, C40 cities, that has embraced this concept in July 2020. My friend of UN Habitat, my dear friend of United Cities and local governments as well. Thanks the commitment of these different organizations around the world. And today we have a lot of new organizations. We have been creating a global movement with the same vision for sharing our methodologies and for proposing the very concrete roadmaps with the different implementations in the different contexts for implementing this proximity as a source of the quality of life. I want to thank as well my colleagues, scientists around the world. And I'm very, very proud of having this session, a lot of different colleagues around the world. We have created a vibrant scientific global community for continuing to explore this concept. This concept is alive, for continuing to propose the new ways, for deepening this concept in its different ways, ecological, economical, and social. I want to thank the European Union, given that they have launched the European Cluster Driving Urban Transitions, the UT, with 3 items, and the second item, the 50-minute city transition pathway for a sustainable future for cities. My good friend Benjamin Bödner and his colleagues, here, hi Benjamin, has published recently this book, Mapping of 15-minute city practices, with more than 100 cities involved in this movement for transforming our cities in Europe. Our iconic scientific paper, Introducing the 50-minute city sustainability, resilience, and place identity in future post-pandemic cities, has overexceeded today 130 kilo views, and it is one of the most quoted scientific papers in the world today in the area of urbanism and territories. My favorite award is the award of UN Habitat. Thank you, UN Habitat, for that. Exactly 2 years ago, when I received the Scroll of Honor. This Scroll of Honor is not an award for Carlos Moreno. This is an award for the 15-minute city as a global initiative, in order to develop a new narrative, a new mobilization on sustainable urban development for contributing to accelerating the implementation of the new urban agenda in the post-pandemic period. This is our common award in all continents for all people involved, nations, regions, metropolis, territories, scientific community, citizen dwellers, and the stakeholders. And at the same time, this is very important to consider that this concept, in fact, is the prolongation of 1 century of thinkers and doers committed for evoking a more humanistic way for living in our cities. And today, we have this cross-fertilization, this common dialogue between scientists, mayors, institutions, international organizations, and practitioners, stakeholders, for transforming our cities around the world. And this is totally possible. I have started this research for evoking how could we develop a more significant climate resilience in our cities, given that for this 21st century, the climate, the global warming is, before all, a climate emergency. This is today a reality in all continents and in all cities. Climate change is totally intertwined in the impact with urbanization and loss of diversity. We have a lot of different COPs. The COP of climate, and we have the COP of biodiversity. In my country, in my city, yesterday, we have started the new COP16. The new COP16 for discussing with the link, livability, nature, and cities, peace with nature. I'm very proud of this new discussion, but at the same time, we need to be aware worldwide that we are in a hard difficulty in face with this unsustainable world, unsustainable cities, and to live with the unsustainable daily life. After tomorrow, I will go to New York at the headquarters of the United Nations for the observance of the World Cities Day 2024. The motto is a local leadership for a sustainable urban future. In 10 years, in 10 days, we'll go to Cairo for the 12th World Urban Forum. It all starts at home. Local action for sustainable cities and communities. This is today the motto, an international movement for developing more local solutions. But dear friends, even if climate change is our common threat for our civilization, this is the case with the last situations in October, Milton, Kirk, the dramatic impacts, including in Italy, recently Boris in Central Europe. This is not the only global threat. We have the strong economical impact. My colleagues of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research published in the Nature Review in April recently two numbers. $38 trillion in damages each year only by the climate impact, and the reduction of 18% of the business, of the usual business. However, we don't have only a climate change as the strong impact. This picture, this number, 1,600,000 people live today in precarious housing. 20% of citizens today of the world populations lives in precarious housing. Housing is not just a roof. This is the motto with UN Habitat. This is the motto with the World Urban Campaign. This is the motto with the new executive director of UN Habitat, Anatolia Rosbach. Housing doesn't mean living in the city. The strong combination, the dramatic combination, climate change and precarious housing is today one of the most important impacts for decreasing the quality of life in our cities and territories. At the end of the 20th century, we have been living with this economic inequality. And at the same time, we have been generating two others strong injustice. The spatial injustice for people that live more and more far of the center of the cities, and the temporal injustice, more and more time spent just for commuting, for having a job, for having a wage, maybe. The urban segregation, the social exclusions, and the economic inequalities are the core of this new modern 21st century social vulnerability. The 50-minute city, the 30-minute territory, proximity, this book is a very concrete response for these essential questions. In what kind of city we want to live in. This is no more possible to accept, to have a lot of different services at the center of the city in blue, and to have just in red, so far 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers, just a house. We need to dignify our life for offering more and more services. Our colleague, our friend, Professor Mohamed Yunus, wrote in 2010 this iconic book, A World of 000, zero carbon, zero poverty, zero exclusion. This was the way when I had this spark for switching from the smart city for the techno-centered solutions towards this humanistic urban way. Recently, with my friend, my dear friend, Peter Nischkamp and Karima Kurtit, they have created a working group with our colleague and friend now, the Nobel Prize, Paul Krugman. He was awarded by his research on the new economic geography with the visionary nearshoring. We have been continuing to explore this concept of the 50-minute city, 30 minutes territory, proximity, not as a target itself, but a tool in order to improve the quality of life, for having happy citizens in a happy city with a happy proximity. And for that, we wanted to reinvent this new economical geography with a sustainable proximity. This is today our new scope for continuing to go beyond 2030, the new economical geography of sustainable proximity. I want to thank the regional science associations, Peter Nischkamp and Karima Kurtit, by this involvement. We have published recently, Karima, Peter, Paul Krugman, and myself, this paper, All Wisdom in the New Economic Geography, Managing Uncertainty in the 21st Century Regional and Urban Development. Proximity in the new economical geography is the way for generating this resilience, we said in our paper. Resilience, this is the active resilience, not for having the same state before an impact of a financial crisis, but to have a progress and to find a new state, to have a new configuration for over-exceed this crisis. And I have been continuing to explore the concept of proximity, the different proximity. We have a lot of different proximity, not only distances. And I proposed 2 weeks ago in a new paper, in preparation of the World Urban Forum, that in phase with the necessary urban and territorial resilience, proximity is the best way. And I proposed this new term, proxilience, proximity as the best resilience. When you have the impact of the climate change, road destroyed, the environment flooded, the high heat waves, when you have the economical impact by the global sourcing, when you have the social exclusions, proximity is the new path for finding a new resilience. My friend Edgar Morin, the father of complexity, the French universal sociologist, 104 years old today, said, we need to promote in a deglobalizing way local food, local craft, local shops, peri-urban market, gardening, and local and region communities. Jane Jacobs said in the 70s, the point of city is to have a multiplicity of choice, the livable cities, to have everywhere, every time, lot of choice without a car dependency. We need to be aware that it is urgent to change our paradigm of our cities from the 20th century to the 21st century. The massification of cars, the development of the fossil energy, and the development of the corporate business district have shaped our cities in the same configuration around the world. After the Athens Charter, promoted by Le Corbusier, we said the city that succeeds is the one that moves fast and furious. We need to change this paradigm of zonification, segmentation, gentrification. We need to go in the way of the Brussels declarations in the 80s, when André Barré, Maurice Coulot, Philippe Lefebvre said we needed to transform our neighborhood for including all the function of the urban life. This is our path. A proximity for everyone, a proximity for all, for implementing this proximity in order to fight against segregation, not only for reduce our carbon footprint, not only for creating new social interaction, but as well for developing a new urban economic model. This is essential if we wanted to federate the different stakeholders in cities for creating a new dialogue, for creating new practices on a global scale. We need to reconcile ecology, economy, and social positive impact for regenerating our nature and renewable energies, for relocating jobs, creating new local economies, shorter circuits, to use our raw materials, and of course for reviving links for developing a real social fabric. Our motto with this book is to be involved for regenerating our cities, street by street, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, in an inclusive, economical, social, and ecological way. We have proposed this model based on a new social circularity with a high-quality societal life for offering 6 essential services: to live, to work with a strong reduction of our daily commute, to supply, to care, to learn, to enjoy, for offering this quality of life, my personal and familial well-being, my sociability with my neighbor and my work colleagues, and my ecological sustainability. For promoting this polycentric organization, for developing this habitability in our cities, for the massification of this rainbow of the high-quality societal life, for mixing different colors, 2 colors, 3, 4, 5, 6, in a new local urban plan, in a new territorial plan. Proximity is at the heart of the quality of life. I am very proud for finishing this book with our collective work, because for the first time in the Occidental research practitioners and in the convergence of the Consiglio Nazionale di Architects, we propose this decalogue, 10 points, 10 key points for reimagining our urban and territorial space in Italy based on this concept of proximity. Proximity, 50-minute city, 30-minute territory, public transportation, green public spaces, support of local economy and cultural heritage, foster inclusive architecture, urban and territorial planning, leverage technology for smart and connected territories, build climate resilient communities, advance well-being, social cohesion and equity, innovative governance and policy frameworks. I want just for inviting you to join in this worldwide effort led by my team, Catherine Gall, the ETA Sorbonne Chair, my friend of UN Habitat, my friend of United Cities and Local Governance. This is a very strategic best effort for creating a worldwide community based on the best practices, exchange, discussion between researchers, academic stakeholders, the Global Observatory of Sustainable Proximity. This is the amazing opportunity for continuing to federate worldwide these different actors. Thank you for your support. Thank you for supporting this idea. This is one of the most significant points for developing in this future. I just again thanks to different contributors of this book, and thank you for your attention. congratulations, and very proud of this book. Thank you so much.
Grazie di cuore.
Thank you so much.
Grazie di cuore al professor.
Thank you, Professor Moreno. Thank you for this presentation, for your enthusiasm. That is really contagious. We learned a new word today, proxilience. And thank you for this wonderful presentation. And you mentioned more than once Professor Peter Nijkamp, because of course the two of you worked together in coming up with this publication and on the notion of the cities of the future. In the post-COVID phase, we realized how important our cities are, and having cities with a human dimension. Inclusiveness is essential, and two factors must be considered to this aim: the social model and the governance model. And Peter Nijkamp will touch upon this point. I wish to leave
wish to thank all the agencies involved, Teresa and Massimo and Giuseppe, for all making this possible, creating as a joint pool of knowledge new insights in what is happening in cities and what should happen in cities. And of course, I would like to congratulate Carlos and his team for having completed this beautiful book with a lot of wisdom. By the way, I also would like to congratulate Carlos Moreno for another big event and another achievement. He has just been appointed over the weekend as co-chair of UN Habitat of the World Urban Campaign Committee, a very important position. So congratulations, Carlos. After the words of the Grand Master, I can only place a few footnotes to the speech and give a little bit my own perspective. And I will do that mainly in the form of some bullet points, because time is limited and we have to be very precise. So what I would like to start with 3 points. Primo, we should not be paralyzed by the fear of lack of urban futures. I think the way Carlos has explained this opens a way to look with some degree of optimism into what cities could achieve. Secundo, the 15 minutes concept is not something cast in iron or stone. It is an evolving concept. It is essentially a trajectory toward a better future. It's not the end point. It is a trajectory. It's a journey which takes us from A to B, and B is not yet fixed. And then tertio, at the end of the day, neither 15-minute cities nor proximity is the final goal of what we want to achieve with our cities. In fact, and that was also implied by Carlos's words, cities need to create well-being for people. It is cities for people, that is, and cities for all. That's also the motto of UN Habitat. And of course, we have to work on it, but well-being, happiness, and all these social science-related objectives are the final goal. So in the historical dichotomy, what often is called cityphilia, so the positive perspective, we love the city, or cityphobia, we are afraid of the city, somewhere we try to find a nice way out. And I think this debate and also the book, which has just been baptized, I think offers a nice perspective which would help us all. Are there certain messages to be articulated? Yes. And I think what I would like to do in my footnotes to clarify maybe 3 messages. If we agree that well-being, cities for all, cities for people, is the final goal also of the cities. Vice President has mentioned 70–75% of the current world population lives in cities. Most of the people. But it's not just the people itself. We want to create good living conditions for cities and for people in these cities. And in recent months, years, Grima Kurtic over there and I myself have been working on the concept of a specific type of urban well-being which we call city love. And we just use the metaphor of love. If I love a person, I love the person for 3 reasons. I love the person because the person is good looking. Second, I love the person because the person has a good spirit. Third, I love the person because the person brings in a nice social family, friends, network, etc. So that's a regular interpretation of normal human love. That metaphorically we can also apply to the city. We love the city, we are responsible for the city because the city looks nice. Beautiful architecture. We are in this beautiful city of Rome, one of the historical examples of beauty, fantastic. But we also love this city because it has a good historical spirit. And there's an optimism in the city. So that's the spirit. And of course, the city ideally has a social community where you would feel home and protected and safe. So these 3 things, which I take as a metaphor from a normal love relationship, we also have applied this and measured this at a city scale. And we have tried to measure all these things and made comparisons among different cities in the world and in different countries. That's number 1. Number 2, the city does not exist. We have cities, we have metropolitan areas, we have all kinds of definitions. But if you ask a person, where do you live? Well, I live in New York. But why do you love New York? Well, but I love the things in Brooklyn. So in fact, the scale in which we love the city is not the big city, it's the neighborhood, sometimes the street level or the district where we live. And that also means that in terms of our care for the city, we really have to look at a decentralized scale, a descaling of city love up to the level of districts, neighborhoods, streets, etc. So that is one more thing. And in China, and some of you may know I have also an appointment in China, so when I'm in Beijing at Tsinghua University, it's interesting. We have sometimes debates on the size of the cities. You know, China believes in a megalopolis and 60 million people is nothing. Mr. Xi has just indicated that he wants to go for 100 million cities. The whole of Italy, and even more, can be accommodated in one city. That's the dream. Is that feasible? Yes, it is feasible. But if you ask people, where do you live then? I live somewhere in a small district in Beijing or whatever, it doesn't matter, and connected with high-speed trains, etc. So the scale in which we are analyzing cities nowadays is rapidly changing. The Vice President indicated different countries, different models. Yes, they are there. But at the end of the day, the mission remains the same. We have to make sure that the living conditions are optimal for any spatial scale in which you live in the city. So that is, in fact, the idea. The citizen in the future is a villager. It is a villager. We love, in fact, the local neighborhood. We are becoming villagers, and the more urbanized we are, 75% of the world population, the more we might become villagers. We love the small-scale ideas in our close neighborhood, and the rest is fine, but that's a different scale. But at the same time, and that is my third point, we also have, of course, we live in a country, we live in an open European economy, etc., and we enjoy also the scale in other cities. One example, any Italian lady who wants to have high fashion will not go to a small village, but will go to Milano to buy some nice dress, right? And any Italian man who wants to buy some very expensive diamonds for his wife will go to Antwerp because that's the center of diamonds all over the world. So that means that there are different scales through which you can be satisfied with the amenities which are created. We cannot create jewelry shops in any village. So we have to specialize, right? And that smart specialization, I think, is important also in our enjoyment of the city. We cannot expect everything at the same place. If I want to go to a good opera, I have to disappoint our friends from Rome. I go to La Scala in Milano, and I'm not going to Rome, even though Rome has perfect operas, but then I go to La Scala. So these types of specializations are important for building up our cities. So having said this, I had prepared a few slides, but don't worry, I will just go quickly through it, because there are a few caveats also in our grand views on the city. One thing, if we believe in the 15-minute city, I think it's just a hypothesis. We have to test whether it's true or not. If we believe in it, we have to know there is Zahavi's law. There's a well-known law which says that on average, all over the world, and he has done all the statistical analysis, on average, all over the world, the average time a person wants to be en route, car, train, at least is 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes, on average. And if you substitute it, if you are at home, then of course, you might not use the car when you are sitting at home, but then in the evening you use the car more. In the weekends you are going to use the car more. There's some sort of inbuilt psychological drive to be at least 1 hour every day on average on the road somewhere in one way or another. And you always find options to use the car or to be away from home. So it's a natural phenomenon. So these things, I think, statistically verified, have to be included, of course, in the things we are developing in this great context of 15-minute city, of X-minute city, knowing that at the end of the day, it's not 15 or X. Does it help us to create human happiness in the city? And now comes an important element. If we are not happy, if we do not love our city, what are we going to do? We would leave. In many cases, we leave. Unfortunately, that might hold in a marriage, but also it holds in the city. If we do not like the city anymore, normally we do not wait until we have every 4-year elections, important as they are, but you never know what the results will be, and I can tell you, no one is patient and wait for 4 years. Maybe the situation in my city will change after the election. No one is going to wait, so people move. So in fact, what we will see increasingly, and that's also the American model, what we will see is, if you don't like the city, if the love is gone, you just go to another city. Now that type of movement creates the dynamic, and that also is sometimes a success indicator for a mayor or for the city council. It's not the election and the voting results. It is the number of inflows and outflows of people given the housing stock which is available in a certain city. So these types of scale analysis, I think, put also the whole debate in a different perspective. And here I just show you a final thing because we are short of time. So we have to look, that was my message, on the one hand into the intra-city thing, so the districts, the streets, etc., a focus of policy. So generic urban policy from a national federal perspective normally will not work out. It is the responsibility of local policymakers to create happiness in districts and satisfy the people all over the world. And the same thing now happens at another scale, i.e. intercity, because we know that, as I explained before, we might need facilities in other cities. We cannot create everything in the same city, but then it needs a balanced policy also at regional scale, sometimes at national scale, so as to make sure that at the end of the day we have happy people, and sometimes also we have happy people in the whole of the country and not only in the city. Now, just two things, just one last minute. Here I have the results of the study we have been doing on the measurement of city love in different districts, many of them in Rotterdam, with different social constellations, rich neighborhoods, very poor, ethnically segregated neighborhoods, etc., lots of migrants, all the problems we have in modern cities nowadays. And we have tried to measure the happiness scales in different districts. And you see an enormous difference, significant difference in terms of happiness feelings and level of well-being in all the cities, poor and rich in one and the same city. Enormous diversity, even at city scale, more diversity than at the national scale. So everything, all the problems in society nowadays are reflected in modern cities. And that's why balanced urban policy, also advocated by Carlos, is so important. So this is in fact a descaling from the urban level into the intra-city level. And here I show you the next one. We also did the opposite, looking into the question, if we map out city love for all municipalities in the country, looking into 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes distances, and then mapping out all amenities. This is based on a huge database. We use OpenStreetMap data for the whole country, so millions of data. Bringing them together, then you get here a map of the country. If you live in a certain place, then you can immediately find out within a distance of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, how many amenities can I find? And you see immediately in the western part, so that's near the sea, the western part is the urbanized part. There you have a high density. It means even within 10 minutes, you have access to many, many amenities in the whole of the area where you're living. If you're living in the eastern part, the northern part, etc., then you see a completely different pattern. So the 15-minute city essentially creates new types of empirical work to be done, both at intra-city level and at the level of the whole country. And I would hope that thanks to the work of Carlos and many others, because many of you have contributed to this project, that we would be able also in the future to work further on extending this notion and create almost 15-minute countries, but from the perspective of, let's say, the X-minute idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The pronunciation of your surname is Meenkamp. Meenkamp. Oh, it's correct. It's all right.
Call me Peter.
Ok. E dunque lo sentivamo durante vari interventi.
So we heard
Si è parlato molto di
climate pollution were mentioned multiple times already by the speakers. We always rank first when it comes to the most polluted cities of the world, unfortunately. This is in contradiction with the objective of climate neutrality by 2050. And Matteo Colleoni will cover this subject, Professor of Urban Studies at Milano Bicocca.
Sì, grazie. Allora.
Thank you very much and good morning. We've already heard about the 15-minute city. It's about a city of accessibility and being able to reach resources quickly so that the population has access to these services, to these resources. And 15-minute cities can be defined quality cities. We talk about the quality of life linked to these 15-minute cities. And this is something that I talk about in my chapter, which I will summarize very briefly. So the quality of 15-minute cities cannot go hand in hand with the quality of the environment. It's only been about 30 years that we've been talking about environmental quality of urban life, and we talk about habitat. We talk about habitat. This is a term that wasn't previously used when talking about urban areas, and we even talk about ecosystems. This is also a term that was rarely used in these contexts. It was more commonly spoken of in rural areas, but now we talk about urban areas, and ecosystems and environment in urban areas, and how 15-minute cities, cities of proximity, cities of accessibility, as I said, increase quality of life and the quality of our environment. What is the problem? Well, the problem is that an increase in environmental quality of cities is a challenge, considering these 4 challenges that we have at a global level. So I will very briefly summarize them. Demographic change. Demographic change, of course, is one of them. And over the past 40 years, we've had an increase, a growth of the global population, and by 2050, we will reach 9.5 billion people. There has been a significant increase with the Industrial Revolution, and then following the Industrial Revolution, we had a population of 1 billion euros, and now by 2050 or 2100, we will have a population of 10 billion inhabitants on our planet, and then there will be a drop. Now, if we consider this growth, of course, we have to consider that there are developing countries, that are seeing migratory flows towards our countries, developed countries, and then, of course, we have an aging population, especially in developed countries. So when we talk about 15-minute cities in Western countries, we're talking about cities for elderly, older populations, aging populations. The second challenge underneath is urbanization, and we heard this from Vice President Costa, because this demographic change is going to be urban, as we've heard. The goal is to reach an urban population of 75%. In Italy, 50% of the population lives on only 10% of our surface, on our territory. The remaining percentage lives in outer areas and on other areas, and on the remaining 90% of our territory. And that means that the 15-minute city is not so much an urban problem, but a rural problem, because we're also talking about 30-minute cities. We have to remember scale. And the third challenge, the third problem, is climate change. We are all aware of climate change and how temperature is increasing. It has also risen 1.5%. We also have an anthropogenic evolution that has increased the input of gases, that has worsened our and polluted our environment, and that has consequences on our infrastructures. We talk about urbanism, but that also means we have to talk about infrastructure. It's these two go hand in hand. The impact on one means there will be an impact on the other. And infrastructures can be impacted by climate change. If these infrastructures are not well maintained or not well built, they will deteriorate. They will be impacted by climate change and the weather conditions, the extreme weather conditions that we are experiencing. And then, of course, motorization. There is a huge amount of engines all over the world, vehicles. We currently have 53 million vehicles, considering 60 million people, a population of 60 million people, which means that there are 40% that are fueled by diesel and gasoline, and that means that we have to do something to limit the amount of vehicles that are transiting on our territory. And you will see this, you will read this in my chapter, in the chapter that I've written. So how we can create a city of proximity, a city that is focused on environmental quality. 9 Italian cities, 9 out of 100 cities in Europe are, 9 are Italian out of 100 European cities are cutting greenhouse gases, striving for a net zero by 2050. that we are all very aware of. There was a typo here. I wrote 2,220. Maybe that's how many years it will actually take us to achieve net zero, but obviously the idea is to reach it by 2050. And then, of course, we have urban policies regarding climate neutrality. These are policies that are discussed in this chapter, and again, in very few words, since I only have a few minutes left, we discuss the policies that we were discussing earlier with Vice President Costa, urban policies. So at a ministerial level, what ministries can do to support urban policies from three standpoints: reducing the consumption of energy consumption in urban areas, especially in transportation and in construction. Those are the two main sectors that impact the energy consumption of our cities. So when we talk about cooling and warming our homes, the concept of reducing our ecological footprint, our carbon footprint, and then of course considering the stockpiling of carbon. These are issues that have nothing to do with politics. These are universal policies that make our lives better. We have to consider prices as well. So these are economic policies that have to do with investments, green investments, and those who can help us invest in the green economy to support these investments that very often have medium to long-term impact. And then, of course, legislation and planification and planning. These are elements that need to be considered closely when we consider territorial planning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Matteo Colleoni nel suo intervento.
In his speech, Matteo Colleoni has often mentioned cars because in the past our cities were almost conceived for cars rather than for humans. How can the 15-minute city, the notion of the 15-minute city, allow us to reverse a model that is based on private cars by taking services closer to citizens? This will be covered by Chiara Martinuzzi, Research Project Manager from the Sorbonne Business School.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie.
Good morning. Thank you. Today, I'd like to briefly discuss what happened within UN Habitat before and after the notion of the 15-minute city was created. We know that this notion is part of chronurbanism, and so we see Howard's Garden City and also Paris notion as a first theoretical contribution, but also previous plans such as the Barcelona planning or the city of Portland example. So the notion of the 15-minute city emerged from a given context. In Italy, we are convinced that the 15-minute city already exists. This is in part due to the fact that Italian cities are relatively small, 250,000, 600,000 inhabitants, but also by certain geographical factors. The OECD has analyzed 121 European cities trying to figure out what is the current status of these cities when it comes to proximity. And if we isolate the only Italian cities covered by this study, we see that the proximity index for these 11 Italian cities is already fairly high compared to the European average. This means that Italian cities somehow lend themselves to the implementation of this model. Then there was another study conducted together with LNX that they have analyzed all the Italian municipalities, 111 of them back then. 73 of them had the highest score. So the notion is already fairly implemented in reality. UN Habitat, before the advent of the 15-minute city notion, had already integrated this notion in its sustainable development goal, in the Agenda 2030 and the new urban agenda. The main documents that define the mandate of UN Habitat and proximity is included clearly included in these two documents in an explicit manner. The 15-minute city was developed as a theory by Professor Moreno in 2015-2016 with the pandemic and with the adoption of this notion by the city of Paris. The notion gained notoriety at world level. It is a timely notion, and it is this timeliness that has supported its success as a notion, because the international debate and the also public awareness, the awareness of the general public of the consequences of poor urban planning. Well, these things have become common sense. Any citizen, any inhabitant of a city would have access to this type of ideas, so administrations needed a clear notion that could be easily disseminated and be accepted by the population. And the 15-minute city is a fantastic slogan because it is attractive, but it is also easy to understand. But it also generated controversy. After the advent of this notion, what happened? In Italy, 3 cities politically committed to the 15M city: Rome, Milan, and recently Naples too, particularly in East Naples, so not at the level of the entire city, but the eastern districts of Naples have adopted the notion. What is interesting is that, leaving aside if on the one hand 3 cities politically committed to the notion, many indirect actions connected to this notion were adopted in other cities, as in the case of Bologna, or in the case of national investments. For example, the National Recovery Plan makes constant reference to this notion. So Italy has been definitely influenced by this idea. UN Habitat has also taken a much stronger stance on these matters since the emergence of this notion, and they translated the general political mandate into a set of very practical guidelines so that these principles can be translated in reality. UN Habitat developed a number of very concrete tools so as to translate those principles into actual projects. For example, I won't name them all, but for example, let us think of the report that is called An Assessment of Public Spaces. It focuses on very practical notions when it comes to how to analyzing the accessibility of public spaces with the reference of the 10-15 minute time frame. So these tools have become very easy in a way to use at local government level. And last but not least, as Carlos mentioned, UN Habitat has taken a very strong stance on proximity by creating the Global Observatory of Sustainable Proximities to take the notion of proximity and develop it and make it accessible at the global level. To conclude, two key messages. Italy has a good inclination for this notion. The tools made available by UN Habitat can be used by Italian cities in order to move away from simply using this notion as a slogan, which is something that then leads to political controversy, but rather adopting the ideas behind the 15-minute city. The point is not the promotion of a slogan, but promoting proximity, promoting a better quality of life. And I will stop here. Thank you. Thank you, Chiara Martinuzzi. A core principle for the European Union is the notion of subsidiarity. Decisions must be taken as close as possible to those directly concerned, guaranteeing adequate public services for local needs. The proximity of public services is essential for a sustainable future. Pablo Fernandez Marmisol Daguerre will cover this topic.
I will speak in English. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Carlos Moreno, Vice President. For United Cities and Local Governments, it's a real pleasure to be here, to be in the Democratic House of Italy, because as UCLG, we represent over 250,000 local and regional governments worldwide, and the core of what we do is democracy. It was in 1913, the very first gathering of the municipal movement, and in this gathering before the wars, the motto of the gathering was the art of building cities and organizing community life. And this is absolutely related to the 15-minute city and to proximity. Because the art of building cities is the way that we portray or we plan the way what we are doing, but we do this to organize community life. And community life has to do with people. So we need to totally link what proximity means, what the 15-minute city means, to people. It is about them that we are talking. And when we talk about people, we are talking about their human rights and how we are linking what we are planning, these maps that you were showing, these huge numbers about how people will be living and where they will be living and how they will be living, to their rights, to their daily lives, and to the exigibility they have to the people who are planning their cities. So for us, from the municipal movement, this is the key and the enabler that the concept of proximity and the 15-minute city brings to the international discussions that we represent. The Vice President was referring to the G20, to the G7, and to the different international processes. As UCLG, we facilitate the U20 together with C40, which is a formal engagement group of cities to the G20. We also facilitate the U7, similar to the G7, and we facilitate the voice of cities in international intergovernmental negotiations. Proximity is helping to bring this, but we need to agree that the 15-minute city does not look like the same in Mexico City, my hometown, as it looks in Barcelona, where we are based. What we have to agree is these specific values that this 15-minute city presents, and how we can all agree that this is also a matter to promote local democracy, local public service provision, which in the end, this is what we called, as you were referring, Laura, subsidiarity. Concepts have evolved, and we name it differently, but the core of what we are advocating for stands as well in subsidiarity. It is local self-governance, what we need to keep promoting, and this has to do with public services. You were talking about here that it's bringing resources to people, and this, from UCLG, we disagree. It is bringing local public service delivery to the people, what has to be at the center of proximity. It is public services, what we are trying to bring back to the agenda. After COVID, of course, there was this anxiety to talk about the future. There was anxiety to talk about long-term solutions. And bringing the idea of the 15-minute city sounds short-term when not understood as the complexity of what planning means. It's bringing back close a long-term solution of public service delivery. And this is something that talking with the parliamentarians and with this kind of audience brings back the idea of what does it mean to have a non-binary approach to our cities. It is a new way of going about politics. It's feminizing the way that we are planning and the way that we are taking decisions at a local level with the support of the national level. And feminizing politics and talking about the non-binary approach to planning and to public service delivery has to do with caring systems. At UCLG, all our strategy is about care and about how the city can care for its citizens and how the system can take care of those who are taking care of us. And who are taking care of us? Local public servants who are delivering our local public services, waste management, workers in public hospitals, parliamentarian staff, all around. So we need to bring all these public services back, and we are bringing that caring is the new way of going about politics, and proximity is caring. This is something that we need to bring back to the attention. The 15-minute city, which was explained in a way of contesting it in a political way, has nothing to do with what we are promoting from the Global Observatory on Proximities. Proximity is about caring. It's about bringing public, democratizing the public service delivery that we are bringing. And on this, we have 4 entry points at United Cities and Local Governments, which is bringing old concepts with new concepts, but in the end, they are the same. One is reclaiming the commons. We just come back from the United Nations General Assembly, where they adopted, in a very complicated and polarized atmosphere, the Pact for the Future. In this Pact for the Future, they were discussing the global commons. This is the outer space, Antarctica, the high seas. What we are claiming from UCLG together with the observatory is that the global commons are nothing else but the right to the city. That we need to talk about local commons if we want to bring into the discussions the whole global discussions. And for us, this is the commons. And the commons is also an enabler to talk about proximity and to bring about a different relation between the public and the private, because all commons should be public, and they are not managed all by the public. So this is the dichotomies that we need to talk, and that planning cities is an instrument to fulfill this type of boundaries. We need to talk about the new essentials. And new essentials are both new public services and new human rights. For instance, the right to time. This is also intrinsically related to the caring systems. If time is a right, then the exigibility of the right comes both from urban planning, but as well from legislation, from education, for where we place housing, for where we place schools, and it's not only about how we move, but where we spend this time and when we spend this timing. New Essentials is bringing back, as Carlos was referring, housing to the agenda, slum upgrading. How are we imagining a 15-minute city when talking about slum upgrading? It has nothing to do with what Paris has brilliantly done. But making 15-minute cities in South Africa would take us a lot of time, would take us a lot of thinking about what those new essentials for people living in slums should look like. It has to do with decent work, digital services, access to food, access to water, accessibility, and education. We need to talk about finance, and this is a crucial discussion that we need to bring about to the proximity issue, which is how we finance, what are we financing, why are we financing, and how we can have access to those resources. Very quickly, which is, in the United Nations, they are discussing, again, the trust. They are trying to repurpose the Trusteeship Council, and it's bringing proximity into the discussion of rebuilding trust in societies. Trust in government is 90% related into the quality of public services that people receive in their daily lives. And then we have politics. But trust in government, either you vote for one party or the other, government as an institution, politics as a way of changing life of citizens, has to do in the access that you have to these services. One way of bringing trust back is delivering these services in a different way, which is ensuring that governance is closer to the people. And finally, which is what we do to build all this in UCLG, which is a new type of multilateral system, which is inclusive, networked, and democratic. The institutions that now govern our international system are not fit for purpose for the challenges that we are facing in the future. We need to bring the multilateral system closer to the citizens, and the idea of the 15-minute cities of proximity can be an enabler to bring these discussions to the global level, this does not mean that we need to bring all the global discussions to the neighborhoods of the people, but we need to bring what the neighborhoods are talking about to the global discussions. Thank you very much, Laura.
Grazie Pablo. Il modo in cui pianifichiamo le città e i paesi avrà un'influenza significativa.
So how we organize our city will have a significant direct impact on our lives, and Hélène Chartier worked with the mayor of Paris implementing the principle of the 15-minute city conceived by Carlo Moreno. So the floor is yours, Hélène Chartier.
And thank you very much for the invitation. I will speak in English. So I just wanted to come back a little bit to the historical model of European city, which are the cities that we love, the cities that are compact, that are mixed use, where people can meet and socialize in public space, especially in Mediterranean cities. That's something you know very well. But in the middle of the past century, some way we lost our way. We lost our way. And by introducing a new mobility system, cars, which were more rapid, instead of winning time, we extend the distance between the different components of the city. And we totally transform the organization of the cities. We create urban sprawl, and we create an over-specialization of land use with residential area separated from business districts, separated from commercial area, and all of them connected by transport systems that were America-oriented. And this has actually created a lot of the problem we are facing today for the planet: air pollution, GHG emission, consumption of land, but also for the people, because it has not improved the quality of life. More commute, travel distance for people, and a lot of neighborhoods that were lacking basic amenities and that were very segregated. So, as Carlos explained very well, it's a movement. Very early in the 70s, a lot of urbanism stood up to say, this is not the right model. This is not what we should develop. Jan Gehl, Jane Jacob, very important. And of course, Carlos has been a fantastic accelerator of this vision by proposing the 15-minute city. Now, this is happening, and this is what is very important and what really matters. How we move from this vision of monocentric cities, where in the middle of the cities there is all the wealth, all the job, all the commercial, they have this mixed use, and the rest of the cities is mostly monofunctional and low densities. How we move and create this polycentric city made of complete and walkable neighborhood. And how we living, what is interesting that we are living a turning point, or maybe a U-turn, coming back to the previous model. where we stop urban sprawl, but instead come back to the compact cities of the historical European model, where we stop this segregation of use by stopping zoning, but instead having mixed use everywhere, where we transform our public space to make more space for children to play, for people to connect, and for nature, and also where we engage the population to be part of this planning transformation. But I want to focus a little bit. This is a very concrete and efficient way to reduce GHG emission. And actually, the IPCC report, so the best climate expert of the world, has been measuring the impact of a good urban plan. And we know that if we adopt a better urban planning model, we could reduce emission by approximately 25%. In some part of the world, in the United States, for example, it's the very first climate action cities should take to reduce their emission. And why? Because a better urban planning model will reduce transport emission. We know that a city plan like Atlanta in the US, low density, is 10 times more transport emissions than Barcelona. And we know that it's also reduced building emission because you have smaller housing unit and shared wall, which is very good to reduce the need of energy for building. It's also reduced the consumption of land, which capture emissions. So it's altogether, it's a very efficient way to reduce GHG emission and develop our sustainability goal. But today, we are not going in the right direction. Let's be totally honest between us. We are still not doing it. We know that by the middle of the century, urban area could triple in size. We know that the size of the cities are growing 50% faster than the urban population. So we need to push to change this model. And when we say compact city, I want to say it's not necessarily high, tall building like in Shanghai or in New York. Actually, there is studies that show that actually the low, middle rise and compact cities, again, like the European model from the historic, is exactly, it's the most efficient model in terms of GHG emission. At C40, we have been pushing this vision since already quite a long time, as Carlos mentioned, partnering with other organizations, and the idea was really to bring this model to mayors across the world, and we are now working with more than 50 cities, large cities, to implement this model. I want to come back a little bit and to focus on the different scale, because now the question is how we do it. And in city like Paris, we mentioned it several, it was interesting, but cities, Paris, the central Paris, like Barcelona, they have already the compactness. They have already the mixed use. The big objective here was to really reclaim the space from street, from cars, to really develop more people-centered public space and nature. 200 pedestrianization of streets next to school. 50% of the parking that has been transformed to either green space or terrace for the local shop. This is concrete action that are show some working. And it's not just only Paris, Bogota, Milan, and many others are exactly doing the same thing. This is a global trend. But it's very important to zoom out, because I would say doing the 15-minute cities in the city center, this is easy. The real challenge, the real cities that has been impacted by the bad urban planning model is the metropolitan area. And in that sense, the greater Paris, with the development of a public transport system with 68 new stations that are connecting the suburb between them, it's really a very concrete way to develop the polycentric metropolitan area. It will bring 95% of the people next to a public station. And it has also been a very interesting way to create new neighborhoods, new centralities in the metropolitan area that are compact and mixed use. But let's zoom out again at the national level. What should be done? And if we continue on the example of the French, so Paris, the metropolitan area, let's look at what the national government is doing. There is a new law that has been just recently passed, which is really about stopping urban sprawl. in our European demography, we don't need anymore to continue to expand the cities. And this law says that by 2050, there will be no more expansion of French cities, and I think that's a very important law. Other cities across the world, Vancouver in Canada has been totally transforming their master plans and land use policy to say every neighborhood, no more single-use zoning is dead. Every neighborhood needs to be complete mixed use and walkable, and they have developed a lot of very specific projects to do it. In Portland, in the US, they have set an urban growth boundary around the metropolitan area, no more expansion as well, and they have developed a lot of projects for smaller housing units, which has been very efficient to reduce emissions, but also to fight the housing crisis. 25% of housing production in a short period, and a reduction of 12% of the housing average rent, which is also a very important element. Melbourne is also a very good example because it was also focusing on the metropolitan area. And I wanted to finish by sharing a few examples of concrete laws that can be done, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to maybe mention just two, because the Vice President was mentioning the need to amend the national law, and I would like to mention just two that could be a recommendation. The first one, stopping urban sprawl, developing a roadmap to reduce urban sprawl and to achieve stop of urban expansion. The Italian demography does not need anymore an expansion of city. And the second law that a lot of Italian cities shared with us is the fact that we need to reform the Legni Tognoli rules that is making parking minimum mandatory. It doesn't make any sense to force cities, to force developers to develop parking, even in cities that are well connected, that have a transport system. It's not good for the planet. It's not what the urban citizens want, and it's also very expensive for the construction. So it's a very concrete way, and we are already seeing cities and nations all over the world to remove this parking minimum. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Grazie Hélène Chartier. Con Benjamin Butner.
Thank you, Hélène. Chartier with Benjamin Butner. How many 15-minute cities do we have in the world today, and what can we learn from the existing models? Thank you to Benjamin Butner, Head of Planning at Munich.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's my true honor to be here in the Italian Parliament, presenting a little bit about what Carlos has mentioned briefly in his keynote speech, our Driving Urban Transitions study, a report where we looked at around 100 cities all over the world to see what's actually happening. And for that, I have to be a bit quick because we are running late, and as a German, this kills me from the inside, so I hope to get some time in. But yeah, so first an overview of what we have looked at, and then I want to tell you a bit about the deep dive that we did in Bologna. So an Italian example which we find in particular interesting, and then how the future could look like. So what we have done is we took a look at what's happening all over the world. We want to identify what are actually 50-minute practices, what could be different typologies, as we've seen from our previous speakers and colleagues and friends, I want to say. There are multiple measures, practices happening all over the world, many with the 50-minute city label, but also some with other terms, which go in the same direction that we are aiming at, which we could submit now with happy proximities, creating livable urban spaces for all, and that's important. Unfortunately, it seems like the world map disappeared, but you can still see the dots. These are the collected 50-minute cities, and then we zoom out. Just picture a world behind all the dots. And you can see that the majority of practices that we still found are located within Europe. over half of them. And then we also have prominent examples in North America. We mentioned Portland, and then we have a bit in Oceania. We talked about Melbourne with the 20-minute neighborhoods. We didn't find too much in South America and in Asia, but that's also a bit linked to our language barrier. So that's also an open invitation. If you want to collect with us these practices, please reach out. I'm sure this list is not complete. It also stopped a year ago. That's why a lot happened since then. That's a zoom in into Europe, and again the map is missing, but you can see here Milan, Bologna and Naples, and now we also have to include Rome as one example. What we have here, we try to use the driving urban transitions key areas, and you can see they define it under sustainable urban mobility, people-centered urban places, and smart urban logistics and urban governance. And you can see the majority of 50-minute practices are focusing on the second part, which you can see in the green field, which is people-centered urban spaces and planning. And I think that's a very good message, a very important one, because we now shift from more transport engineering approaches to more human-centered urban planning approaches. I myself come from the field of accessibility planning, and they always used to be a mobility-centered accessibility. The faster we go somewhere, the better. We invest in highway structures, but now it's more bringing places together, reducing distances, and by this we have to focus on the human scale. And that's one of the richness of the 50-minute city. You can also see sustainable urban mobility is in the heart of it, and here are some examples how streets can be changed. You can see examples from all over the world. There are some on smart urban logistics, but not too many. This is something that in the future, I guess, we have to put a bit more focus on. And you can also see here the example of Melbourne, which is also including urban governance for mobility transitions in the 20-minute neighborhood. Let's jump into the deep dives. This is a little overview of what has been happened around the world. But that's not enough. We just scanned reports, but then actually we wanted to really get a bit deeper, and for that we have to talk to people. We have to talk to practitioners, we have to talk to policy makers. So this was important for us, and we had to actually review the local plans. And we selected 6 cities from within Europe because driving urban transitions is funded by the European Union. But we shouldn't stop here. That's also one message. But for this, we focused on 6 cities within Europe, huge cities like Paris and Vienna. But then we also looked at mid-sized cities like Edinburgh, Ghent, Lisbon, and a bit smaller Bologna, with around 400,000 inhabitants. Focusing on Bologna. Bologna is a very interesting example, because Bologna is really focusing on participatory processes. So you can see Bologna is trying to strengthen the emphasis on service decentralization and how to engage the local community. And they see the neighborhood as a common good, which is very important. So that includes inclusive accessibility for all to different basic essentials. One of the key innovations is that it's community-focused urban space and service decentralization. And they approach citizens, they have workshops, and they ask them, what are your actual needs? What are you missing in your neighborhood? For that, they created a very interesting approach. It's called proximity agents. So each neighborhood, and there are 6 bigger neighborhoods within Bologna, has one proximity agent. So 6 people that build a bridge between the citizens, the residents, and also then the policymakers and the planning, the local government, basically. And they then facilitate this discussion through workshops, through discussions. And also they have walk-alongs and then decide. For instance, here you can see a plan. And they walk along and they discuss with the actual residents, what are you missing here? What should we focus on? Do you feel safe on this road? How about going there by foot? How about cycling? What are barriers for you? Why are you not cycling? And so it gets very detailed. And there are 24 of these identified local city areas, which is the way forward, how to include the actual needs of citizens. Another example that you can see here for the implementation, they meet, they talk, they discuss, and hopefully they find a common solution. And then they vote on the most important measures that should be taken, and for this a dedicated budget will be assigned. You will find more about that in the book, so also a little reading recommendation here. But to summarize my little talk, success factors, we need strong local leadership for robust public engagement. So again, listening to the citizens, they might have better ideas than we because they are there on a daily basis and know how to go from A to B, and also how to spend the time within their neighborhood. We have to acknowledge that public transport is still the backbone, and that's rightfully so, but around this we should create dense mixed areas in line with the 50-minute city idea. Obviously there are challenges, financial constraints. If you have a dedicated person for a proximity agent for each neighborhood, this will cost you money, also the workshops, and then if you start this process, you also later on have to dedicate a certain budget to really implement the measures that were mostly voted for. So for that we have to assign budget. Other issues that have to be discussed are gentrification and affordability, so that we actually create neighborhoods that are accessible and livable for all. Another thing is we have to keep on monitoring and assessing methods. Many cities are not really doing this sufficiently, and here we need some improvement, and I think this needs to be a collective effort. Also, many universities have accessibility tools in place, and for that I think common effort is needed. And at the end, I believe that the 50-minute city is and will keep to be a very powerful concept. It's transitioning to happy proximities, which is a very good idea. I like the term of resilience and proximity, to put it together. Proxilience, thank you very much. I think that's a good way of showing that actually by creating closeliness, by creating more livable urban spaces, we also raise a resilience in all kind of ways and make it more livable for the citizens. And for that, again, we have to listen to them. Public participation is important so that we don't lose them on the way, and the communication that we're using. And thank you very much for your time and for listening, and yeah, looking forward to the next presentations.
Adesso noi dobbiamo lasciare spazio e tempo.
We have to leave the floor to the round table, and so I would call my colleague, Monica Maggioni, journalist and TV presenter, who will moderate the round table, to join me up at the table, and I thank all our speakers.
Call you back afterwards. Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for your patience. Monica Maggioni, lo sarò. Secondo i cavalieri, buongiorno di nuovo.
Good morning.
Distinguished international guests that we heard till now, that has been great. E ora we jump into Italian reality. So, andiamo alla realtà italiana. Mi avete lasciato il posto vuoto di fianco per timore.
Did you leave an empty seat next to me because you were afraid of what I was going to say? Just joking. Good morning. And as you can see, now from the distinguished speakers sitting here at the podium with me, this is the moment when all the things that have been said this morning.
Here. Would you mind? Because, because you're kind of the beginning of all these stories, so you're supposed to be here with us. Dico a Carlos Moreno di raggiungerci perché poi alla fine vorrei sentire anche da una persona come...
I was just telling Carlos Moreno to join us on stage here.
A tutti questi signori.
What is the point? It all starts from the thinking of Carlos Moreno first, and all the distinguished speakers you heard this morning. But here at this table are people who play a very important role in Italian political life. So we are late with the schedule. You'll have to be very brief, but you are politicians, so you're experts there. What do you think can be implemented of all the notions you heard this morning? What can be transposed in the context of an effort that is ongoing in these very hours when it comes to rethinking what it means to live in cities in Italy? And with this input, without a precise order, I will start with Senator Gasparri, as is the rapporteur of a new law. And then we'll have a very... and then we'll try to figure out... We'll hear the other speakers. During the previous legislature, during the Draghi government, there was an attempt at making a law on urban regeneration, a huge topic that can comprise so many things: architecture, cities, monuments, skylines, two interventions to make buildings more compatible with environmental norms, the issue of emissions, etc. Putting an end to land use and regenerate abandoned urban spaces. Even in the city centers, we have such abandoned spaces, not only in the peripheral areas. So buildings that could be regenerated. So a very huge topic because it impacts on the plans of cities, on the technological evolution and environmental needs, curbing emissions, modernizing the heating systems, and so on, you name it. And also the possibility by demolishing and rebuilding to save on space somehow. But the law was not passed in the end because the perspectives were too diversified. At the beginning of the legislature, I submitted once again a proposal. The rapporteur at the Senate is a colleague from my political group. Now, of course, everyone is coming up with their own definition. Architects have their own vision of the city. Property developers have an interest because they for obvious reasons. Local governments are saying it is very trendy for them at the moment to say, let's put a hold to land use. So everyone has an interest when it comes to urban regeneration, and everyone has their own proposal. So the risk is at the end that the engine is not put in motion because of, paradoxically, of this excess of interest. So I hope that the proposal we submitted will be voted upon in the Senate, because at some point we need a law. It's as if someone would wake up one morning and say, let us write a new criminal code. The risk is that everyone takes an interest and you're never gonna have it. Okay. This is a very brief round table, so I'll ask a question. The issue is, will there be a priority? Will something be prioritized? Simplifications must be introduced, reusing abandoned land, the possibility of building for additional volumes in the case of demolition and reconstruction, the possibility of raising the quality of life in the regenerated neighborhoods. For example, in the Corviale neighborhood, they built a beautiful soccer field, but they failed to regenerate the building itself, which was horrible, and it remained so. Public-private partnerships, for example, when it comes to social housing, and then incentives. Of course, there are funds from the recovery plan that may be used. It is often in these cases a problem of time. As was said, we are sitting on a pile of debt, but we are surrounded by piles of money. The pile of debt is the public debt, and the piles of money is the funding coming from the EU for the recovery plans, but they must be spent quickly. The point is, we have a window of opportunity now. We are still in a phase of the legislature where we can still make some modification to this bill. Then the Senate, after the vote of the Senate, it'll have to go to the Chamber of Deputies. So we have altogether 3 years. 3 years will run fast. We don't want to use more land, but we also don't want to use the legislature without passing a much-needed law. We are at the amendment phase now, and I hope that in November the Senate can start voting upon this bill, so that a decision is taken. As de Gaulle said, an imperfect decision is better than a decision that we failed to take. Now, and I hope we can pass this law. Thank you. Now, Senator Sigismondi, I'll underline one point. The very important list that Senator Gasparri just mentioned must be part of a vision, because this morning we are saying that, yes, you can have the components of a given machine, but if you don't have a clear idea of the type of city we wish to have in the future, we risk of proceeding in an uneven manner. The political world should come up with a synthesis on an idea for cities that should become an idea for societies. Yes, thank you. Politicians must interpret the needs that are expressed by the territory and by society, and I thank you for the oxygen you brought in this all this morning, allowing us to better breathe with an idea that is aimed at improving the quality of life of citizens. And improving the quality of life of citizens is the final ultimate aim of politics and of the proposal for the new law on urban regeneration. That will be very important. In the various speeches I heard, it was discussed how in recent years in the course of the years we built the cities of distances, not simply distances in the sense of being forced to take a car, but also distances when it comes to social relations. Some speakers have emphasized the fact that perhaps urban planners in recent years, throughout the years, made the mistake of focusing on zoning, and zoning has created diversification of the functions that then ultimately increases the gap between the various areas, forcing citizens to commute long distances to even do basic things. A highly urbanized territory as the Italian one, with such a relevant historical and architectonic heritage, must take action when it comes to its cities that host 70% of its population. So cities are the first priority to tackle, and we must be a little romantic, because when we discuss of the 15-minute city, we should think of the Italy of the old boroughs, of the old neighborhoods, the little villages that created the social life that was needed to guarantee a better quality of life. In the cities, humans are no longer at the center, and they should be placed at the center once again. We unfortunately live in a society where people are fundamentally lonely and left alone, and there is a lack of human relations. This bill is aimed at intervening in areas that have been so intensively built upon, where with a challenge that was launched by Senator Gasparri that we must face together, because not only we need this law, but we also need certainty of how much time it will be needed to approve it. Forza Italia 2 had submitted a proposal. It has now been included in the bill on urban regeneration, and we need at the end to come up with a text that can be implemented in reality, because it is time to change our cities and make them more livable. Thank you, Senator Sigismondi. Thank you also for reminding us the fact that within the 15-minute cities notion that was developed by Professor Moreno, well, that notion expresses so much about our own history, about a certain Italianness that in the course of centuries built its society through boroughs, and this can be an inspiration when we look at the future. I would now leave the floor to Roberto Traversi. He's here in with a double hat somehow. You will speak from the point of view of the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies.
Thank you for organizing this event. It was very interesting, and I am a member of the Association of Architects since 1999, and it was very interesting, as I said, for me to be here this morning and to hear what other experts on architecture had to say. So thank you very much for all your presentations. And then, of course, I just received the million-dollar question, what to do? It's quite complex in the world that we currently live in, of course. We all know that. Maybe in the 1940s it was much easier, and in the 1930s we had Corbusier. It was quite easier. Things were very different. The 1970s were a turning point for this country. I'm not going to be pointing fingers here. Of course, in the 1970s, that is when the population was really focused on purchasing homes. And so, for example, the city that I come from, in Genova, we had hundreds of thousands of citizens more compared to nowadays. And so urban regeneration was even more important because we have very old homes and buildings that are not currently being lived in, and so we have to consider some sort of regeneration, some sort of requalification of these buildings and these homes. And then, of course, we also have to consider energy, the energy transition, the green transition, because we have to live up to certain expectations. So it's quite complex to answer this question from an urbanism point of view, purely urbanistic point of view. It's much more complex, as we all know. We have to think about our cities in terms of services, access to services. That has been said more than once this morning. We have to take a step back and build on urban planning that considers all these disciplines. And Senator Gaspari's approach and vision is very intriguing, but we have to first and foremost understand in what direction we want to go. In the previous legislation, I was Undersecretary of the Ministry of Transportation, and we had lots to talk about on the different norms regarding roads, for example. And we had a much different vision. So it's very difficult to combine the different and differentiated visions. That's probably the first step, because if someone does something and then the following legislation does something completely different, obviously things get even more complicated. Maybe a discussion such as this one could be stimulating. If I link back to what you were saying, maybe this can be an open discussion in a very forward-looking exchange of visions, for example. This could be a starting point on how to include everything that has been said. Yes, so that's what I was trying to say. This has been a very formative morning. We heard about eliminating parking in cities because we have to look at things very differently in the future, and that is something I completely agree with. That's something that we have to do if we want to change our cities. So thank you to all the experts for their very insightful presentations, because it truly was insightful. But now the real challenge is putting everything on paper. Thank you very much for this insight, and we will now hear from Honourable Member of Parliament, Gian Piero Zinzi, who can maybe help us understand how things can truly be put into place if they are a possibility, a concrete possibility. I followed the very interesting presentations, And it reminded me of the movie Back to the Future in some way, because Carlo Moreno's vision is something that we were familiar with if we think back to our traditions, and it is something that we want to return to. The vision over the past 15, 20 years from an urbanism point of view has changed drastically, especially if we consider the dramatic years of the pandemic. And this helped us go back to a vision that we had abandoned in some way and that we had forgotten. And we are now rethinking of how to connect cities. We are truly focused on how to link cities and link citizens with this concept of 15-minute cities. That is something that I truly admire and find extremely stimulating. And that's something that it's a starting point for many of us, because it's very complicated for law, a norm to, it's very hard for a norm to interpret the will of residents, of citizens. But there is the need to give answers to our citizens and to our population. We talk about sustainability, but there's no better solution than this to lead us towards a true world based on sustainability, to make more cities more habitable and make our lives better, the quality of our lives better. So we have to consider the political involvement in these concepts, but we also have to take a look in more practical terms. We need to strengthen the culture of a community. We need to do this with a well thought out objective. And so we are all striving to achieve the same goal. Thank you very much. And I think that this has been a very engaging morning, I have to say, for everyone. Thank you for the invitation to take part in the roundtable of this event organized by the National Council of Architects, because urbanistic visions is thinking about the space where people live, where human lives have to interact. From a more disciplinary point of view, the standpoint that was presented this morning, including the publication presented by Carlo Moreno, is something that we have to consider. I do have my doubts about imagining happy cities. Maybe we have to think about better cities. Because the trends that we are facing and have been facing are going in the opposite direction, considering our objectives. So this, if we think about it, is a very critical vision, because we have a fragmented crystal. That is our legislation. It's a legislation of vision, but it is not very practical. And then we have the single regions that have their own vision, but we don't have a single unified vision. And then our cities are all very different. Rome, Milan, Naples, others. These are the biggest cities. But they're all very different, and we have to focus on three main points. Rebuilding our urban areas, and I'm not talking about urban and territorial planning. I'm talking about not considering the single square foot of our cities, because that's becoming more and more expensive, And so it's not very realistic, but we have to focus on a law that is based on the following principles. And then, depending on the regional subsidiarity, will be implemented in practical terms. The first is soil consumption. That is a huge problem for us because if we are moving towards bigger and bigger cities demographically, and we want to protect our territory, our nature, and the green areas, this is a very important technical element to consider. And then we have the geological element to consider. That's also a risk if we take into consideration, as we must always, climate change. And then the third point is subsidiarity in public construction and public and building. Those are the three main points that we have to focus on. And then we talked about infrastructure, circular economy. That's something else because these future cities have to take this into consideration as a circular economy. And then urban taxing, because we are talking about funding. We're talking about financial initiatives, activities. Some part of the funding is public, but we also need some sort of private participation in this funding. So this exchange between public and private sector is not something that we can keep abstract. We need concrete exchange. We need concrete interaction between public and private sector, because otherwise the public sector will give more than it gets back. And this is a critical point. We need to regulate partnership, this public-private partnership. And then the last point is the technical equipment of municipalities, because we physically don't have the human resources and the equipment to manage very complex problems. And we have engineers and architects and other experts involved in the procurements and the bids, etc. We need experts who know how to manage all these disciplines. We need project managers that can manage the administrative aspects. We need experts who also know how to deal with the engineering part and the planning part. They need to be able to cover all these disciplines. So we need these human resources and we need these infrastructures that can meet these future challenges. Now we're considering cities as a flexible body that evolves and changes and adapts. But that's something that needs to be regulated, and that's something that needs to be legislated. And that is the only way that we can achieve a somewhat happy city, because we have to make our cities more just and equitable.
Un punto di approdo.
Thank you. Thanks to Roberto Morasut. Senator Gasparri was telling me that public and private is one of the points he noted down on paper. The fact that he was kind with me today this should not mislead you. He will keep on being unkind to me on the phone. We have our heated exchanges. So to conclude anyway now, let's just leave the floor to Professor Moreno. There was a tension in this round table. On the one hand, yes, but we must give me a list of things to do on the one hand, and on the other hand, a vision, because we need both. What would be your recipe to keep the two together? How do you turn such an ambitious project into something feasible? Microphone, please, microphone.
Scusa. Sì, la mia opinione è che
My opinion is that the most important thing is to now in order to develop this proximity, is having a systemic view so as to act transversally. With one pillar, connecting all this to the issue of the quality of life for inhabitants, for all the inhabitants of the city. I would like to take this opportunity to bring to the attention of the lawmakers the conditions laid out in the book. This book does not contain a list, but we could use this. But there are a number of points. Number one, building an approach based on proximity as the key to a sustainable proximity. Number two, extending the principle of proximity beyond urban centers, and so the intercity and intracity that was discussed earlier. Number three, strengthening public transport and mobility networks. Mobility networks are essential if we wish to reduce car dependency. Number four, promoting public and green spaces so that the city can be walkable. Number five, supporting the local economy and cultural heritage. Number six, promoting a new inclusive architecture and urban planning. Seven, using technology to build smart territories. Eight, the climate issue. Nine, promoting equity and social justice. Number 10, renovating governance and the political cadres. So I would say take this decalogue, take these 10 points, and organize your discussion as lawmakers around it. Thank you. And this is a significant conclusion. You have the book that is very interesting. It goes in depth in its exploration, and it offers these 10 points as an excellent starting point to do actual work. I thank the Italian political representatives and that are here, and I now leave the floor to the vision of the United Nations with Frédéric Saliès and Laura Squillaci, who will come back to the podium.
Eccomi, ci risiamo. Prego. Sì. Allora, Carlos, siamo all'ultimo intervento.
So, the last contribution by Frédéric Saliès. In an era of increasing individualism, the proximity of gender reminds us that collectively organized solutions can be more efficient and beneficial for all, rather than piling up individual decisions.
I won't keep you for 15 minutes before lunch. I think that's unfair. So, sorry, hour late. No. It's not the point. I think it was really a wonderful morning, and we we went through several dimensions of the 15-minute city, and I think this was really interesting, this last segment as well, to see how we can articulate the programmatic aspect with the vision, or better said, vice versa. And I would like to emphasize that there is a third component in the proximity agenda, which is an assessment framework to assess how our policies are progressing. So I would like to thank everyone. I want to thank the organizers. There's no time for protocol at this moment of the session. Professor Carlos Moreno told us the least important aspect of the 15-minute city is 15. I disagree with him. I think the least important word in that statement is minutes. It's not about time. The 15-minute city is not about time, it's about density. Yes, it's about density. Is about is about the use of motorized or non-motorized transport. It's about distribution of services. It's about urban planning. It's about urban design. It's about the economy. It's about governance. It's about everything. Actually, it's an entry point to discuss the matter of territorial and urban planning and design. And in that sense, it's an excellent way. I mean, even the controversy that is created in some places, I mean, really not significant, but it's a way to put this topic of urban planning and design back into the political discussion, and that is good, because that is necessary. Life would be so much nicer if we could all access all our daily needs in 15-minute city, in 15 minutes. Oh, I forgot something. Walking or cycling, or maybe, what about an electric bike? Is that acceptable? Or even a motorbike or a light car? Or what about, let's dream, what about spending 15 minutes in a very large, yes, SUV, polluting and everything? I want to stress that the key word here is sobriety. The key word is what do we need to move in the city? What's the quality of experience? And I think all that was well covered by all the previous speakers. And I would like to thank you, everyone, for making all these references to UN Habitat, so I don't need to repeat any of this, which is really nice. I can speak freely. So if you have, I mean, when you take the book, please read the little contribution I've made in it, where I briefly speak about the functions of the 15-minute city from a governance perspective, and we had looked at the soft power and the hard power, and I think we had a good illustration of that this morning. So let me jump directly to the conclusion. I wanted to say as a conclusion that in the current context of increasing individualism and polarization, the city of proximity reaffirms the responsibility and the legitimacy of public authorities in promoting or regulating certain patterns of urban and regional development in the name of a higher collective interest. For example, climate change, prosperity, and social cohesion. So in that sense, the city of proximity is a very powerful governance principle. Thank you very much for your attention.
Allora, ringraziamo ancora Frédéric Salier, ringraziamo Carlos Moreno.
Thank you very much to Frédéric Salier, and thank you, of course, to Carlos Moreno, the heart of all of this. Thank you to all our guests and to all the participants to this evening. Thank you to, truly from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here, and thank you to our host, the Chamber of Deputies.